regular viewers were probably not expecting this video. Even a serious riverman gets to have some fun on a board at the beach. Sort of the beach. The sandy banks of Kentucky Lake / Tennessee River. Okay, I have to admit, building a skimboard may be slightly off topic for this channel, but not that much. Personally, I'm interested in anything you can build out of wood to use on the water. The focus of the Cumberland Rover project remains steadfastly on building and sailing small wooden boats, of course, but sometimes I like to branch out and have a little fun. Building a skimboard is a ridiculously cheap and easy DIY project and a great way to have some fun at the beach or even in the creek. For those unfamiliar with the activity, skimboarding is a board sport that originated in Laguna Beach, California in the 1920s. Riders gain speed by running with board in hand, then stepping on to hydroplane across shallow water. You can do sort of skateboard-like tricks. And if you're really good, you can actually skid out far enough to catch and surf waves. As the story goes, Laguna Beach lifeguards began using round wooden discs to travel between stands and ride shore breaks. Supposedly, those early boards were built from solid redwood plank. As skimboarding gained popularity in the 60s, boards evolved to look more like miniature surfboards. Some made out of plywood, some fiberglass with a foam core. Disclaimer: you should probably not attempt to ride a skimboard if, like me, you're over the age of 30. Not for any safety-related reason. Falling on sand doesn't really hurt that bad. It's more to avoid looking ridiculous. Then again, once you hit 30, you don't necessarily care about looking ridiculous. At least that's my attitude. Let's tear it up. But in all seriousness, skimboarding does require some athleticism and very good balance, obviously. Fortunately, I still have a tiny amount of muscle memory remaining from my skateboarding days. Even if you have no interest in riding a skimboard, you can still have fun building one, maybe for the kids or grandkids, or even as a wall hanger. They make a great painter's canvas. Like anything hobby related these days, commercial skimboards can be very pricey, up in the $800 range even. But lucky for the DIYer that just wants a functional board to mess around on, wood is still just as affordable and practical a medium as it was in the 1920s. In fact, wooden boards are still available commercially, some high quality and some of the common gift shop variety. Common plywood is the obvious choice for a home-built skimboard. A full 4-foot by 8-foot sheet of 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch exterior ply should only run you around $30. This can vary quite a bit with location, but that's about what it costs in my area. And you can get several boards out of one sheet. Going with a half sheet is an option, but consider that taller, heavier riders will require a board longer than 48 inches. The only tools needed are a flexible yardstick to draw curves, a jigsaw, sandpaper, and clamps. Having little to no experience with skimboards, I figured I should probably start out by building 3 at once. That makes sense, right? You see, this increases the probability of accidentally stumbling into making a good one. I plan to make a 1/2 inch thick classic egg-shaped board, a 1/4 inch egg duplicate, and a 1/2 inch fishtail board, all of varying lengths and widths. The idea was to test a variety of sizes and shapes to see if any one was discernibly better than any other. True, my lack of skill on a board could be a confounding factor in this experiment, but never mind that. I'm just having some fun here. Regardless of the shape chosen, the process is the same. I began building the 1/2 inch fish by first marking and cutting out a cardstock pattern. Making a half pattern is an easy way to ensure symmetry of more complex curved shapes. 1/2 of the board is traced onto the plywood with a pencil, the pattern mirrored over the center line, and the second half traced. 2 sheets of poster board taped together make good pattern material. The fish was my extra large board, 54 inches long and 22 wide. This is considerably larger than the recommended size for my height and weight. I have no idea if the fishtail actually does anything, but man, it just looks cool. Got the flat part of the rail sanded down and cleaned up with the belt sander, and just kind of the overall shape smoothed out. And now I'm putting a bevel all the way around the rail on both sides, and I'm going to round that off. The clamps are set, and I'm gonna leave the board to sit overnight. I may actually spray it down with the hose one more time. I did each side, I just sprayed it continuously for about 3 minutes maybe, and it's definitely not soaked through, but the top and bottom layers are pretty wet. This is actually 4-ply, 1/2 inch 4-ply. So I've got 5/8 of elevation at the tail. I almost said the stern. And at the nose, that's probably about 1.25 inches. I didn't measure it. No idea if this will actually work, but I think it will result in a functional skimboard at the very least. So the board has only been clamped about 4 to 6 hours now. I think I've got enough rocker already, so I don't think I need to leave it overnight at all. I think this is pretty good right here. Got 1 inch at the nose and about 1/2 inch at the tail, and a big flat section in the middle, and I think that's what you want. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the finishing process. And you can see I've got some voids to fill in, and of course I would end up with a void right there on the nose. Not a good place to have a void. Oh well. So here is the first layer of finish on the board. All my boats are just painted pretty straightforward. At most I might do like a boot stripe or a water line or something like that, but I want to have some fun with this board. So if that looks a little funny, it's because it's not paint. It's actually a blue stain, and you can see some little splotches of grain there where you still see the color of the wood because they just didn't quite absorb the stain like the rest of the board. And I actually think it looks kind of cool, but I still have a few layers to do. added a second board for comparison, so while my spar urethane is drying on the fish, went ahead and cut out this blank. This egg is a little bit shorter, it's 51 inches, and the fish I think is 54, and the fish is 21 wide, this one is 19. So should just be interesting to see what it does. I'm not going to spend much time shaping the rail or really doing much finishing work at all on this, other than just to do the bare minimum of sanding and put some rocker in it, just like I did on the fish. Later I would go on to duplicate the 1/2 inch egg in thinner, lighter 1/4 inch plywood, just to see how that affected performance. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. With the fish complete and the prototype egg halfway, sort of, not at all finished, I needed to actually get out and go skimboarding to see if my boards were even functional at all. So Sydney and I packed up a cooler and headed for the clear, cold water of our favorite creek to have some fun and do a little testing. Keep in mind, the last time I set foot on a skimboard was when I was about 10 years old on a family vacation to Amelia Island, Florida. So this could be interesting. Well, wouldn't you know it, that the last minute unfinished prototype board actually works quite a bit better than the fish, which is kind of disappointing because I worked hard on finishing out the fish. But the good news is that I have a good board shape and a good design that I know works now. The ugly low effort board actually works a lot better than the nicer one, but I think a big part of what's going on there is maybe the shorter length of the egg is better. I mean, the egg is basically the classic skimboard shape that I tried to imitate, but it's also a little bit shorter and has more rocker. I think I didn't have the fish clamped down long enough to the molds to give it enough rocker, so it's quite a bit flatter, and that may be a big part of what's holding the fish back, is lack of rocker. So back to the drawing board, I guess. After spending the afternoon splashing around in the test tank, aka the creek, it seemed my skimboard designs were generally on the right track, though there was a lot of room for improvement. It's hard to describe, but the fish was noticeably sluggish and kind of a letdown. But I wasn't ready to give up on it just yet. Back in the shop, I laid the fish up in the jig once again, attempting to increase rocker, figuring maybe that would do the trick. I gave the egg the proper paint job it deserved and created a sibling for it, a 1/4 inch sister ship, painted similarly. A few days later, with a pile of skimboards stacked in the stern of my 12-foot skiff, I was bound for the natural sands at the mouth of a big bay on Kentucky Lake. Not entirely dissimilar to a beach on the ocean shore, that would be the perfect spot for a little summer test and shred. Surrounded by thick woods, the beach is best accessed by boat. I had about a mile to row. Just got to the beach. There's a few people in pontoon boats hanging out over here on sort of the nicer sands, but I've got this little strip to myself, at least for the moment. Got a gentle slope of the bank and then kind of a flat shelf here, which is perfect. Let's tear it up. Got a wicked swell coming in, dudes. Surf's up. Alright, I'm good and warmed up. I've taken a few runs here, and it's a pretty decent little spot. So now I just kind of want to cycle through the 3 boards and do some testing and comparison. So I've got the 1/2-inch plywood egg, the 1/4-inch egg, and the big 1/2-inch fish board. The fish is about 54 inches long by 22 wide, and the eggs are both, well, they're the same shape and same dimensions. They are 51 by 19 or 20. There may be a little variation between the two, but something about like that. So I'm gonna start with the 1/2-inch egg. The egg does pretty good, pretty solid. No signs of cracking or frying. Skimboarding is like 90% running, 10% skimming if you're lucky. If you're good, which I'm not. I feel like I'm actually better now than when I was 10, just because I couldn't even ride a skateboard yet when I tried skimboarding at 10. I think that was probably the first board sport I ever tried. Time to move on to the 1/4-inch egg, and I know exactly where to put my feet in case I forget. Man, these guys might be onto something with this whole falling on sand thing. A lot nicer than falling on concrete skateboarding.
Sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip that started from this tropic port aboard this tiny ship. The mate was a mighty sailing man, a skipper, brave and sure. 5 passengers set sail that day for a 3-hour tour.
The 1/4-inch egg definitely feels different. It feels like if you were skilled, it would have the potential to glide a little further. And I can't really explain why, but I also notice that when you're running, the wind tends to catch the board a lot worse than with the heavier boards. The 1/4-inch and 1/2-inch eggs are definitely very different from each other. I'm just not really a good enough skimboarder to understand or explain how and why they're different. So on the 1/4-inch, I didn't do anything to put rocker into the board. I just used the natural curve of the 1/4-inch plywood that was a little bit warped. But as soon as you jump on it, it does have some flex. So when you're riding, you get more rocker just from your body weight. Moving on to the big fish board. 54 inches long by 22 maximum beam, or whatever surfers and skimboarders say. 22 inch at the rails, 22 inch width, I don't know. and despite how cool the fish looks, it's kind of disappointing because it's just not a very good board. It doesn't work very well. I think it's too big for me and too heavy. I didn't really think weight would affect the board as negatively as it seems to. My observations could be dead wrong, stemming from my lack of skimboarding ability, but it seems pretty clear to me that I can skim both of the eggs a lot farther and more consistently and easier than the fish. So the shape is not the problem with the fish. I think it's just size and weight. It's too long for me and too wide. And it does seem to have a lot more float, which is kind of what I was going for. I was sort of under the impression that float might actually help me skim farther, but it sort of seems like it's just the opposite because you're not floating, you're hydroplaning. I should also mention that all these boards could probably use more rocker for sure. I've noticed that a lot of the rocker that I tried to put in was successful to a degree, but it seems to have come out after I've done some skimming. The boards have ended up flatter for whatever reason, so maybe they need to be laid up clamped for a longer period of time. Maybe they need to be wetted out more, or maybe they just needed to be wetted out throughout the clamping process. Alright, so this is what you might call a puddle that may or may not be like 10 feet away from my house. And it hasn't rained lately, so I don't know where this water came from. I've got a few maneuvers I'm going to attempt on the puddle here. The old skid pond. Sydney's walking by making a certain kind of face right now. She has just realized that I'm actually 14. Did you see how I like ollied that?
I don't know what ollie means, but good for you. I'm happy for what you did.
It popped up in the air.
I don't know what these terms are, buddy.
So the 1/2-inch egg is clamped up again. I'm gonna try this one more time. Trying to put in a good permanent rocker. Curve on the bottom after a little bit of testing in the skid pond here. I think I've got it figured out now. It really seems like 1/4-inch plywood with a good curve in the bottom, a good amount of rocker, is the key to a good skimboard. This is the 1/2-inch plywood one, and it works. It kind of works as is, but I think it'll be a whole lot better if I can get it to keep its shape. So I'm gonna leave it clamped for at least 24 hours and wet it out every now and then. But really, I think leave it clamped as long as you can. And I'm just using a 2x4 there at the nose, and I've got the clamp set back about 16 inches or so. I think if you were gonna build one for a kid or for someone close to my height and weight, which is 155 pounds, 5'8", I would definitely start with 1/4-inch plywood. I think that's the way to go. If you ride really hard, like jumping waves and stuff, you could probably break it pretty easily. But otherwise, I think 1/4-inch is great, just based on my testing. But the 1/2-inch definitely will work. It's just a little tougher to get it to hold that rocker, and it's also quite a bit heavier. This is the 1/4-inch egg after being clamped to the jig for about 24 hours, and being wet down with the hose every now and then. You can see it's got maybe 1/2 inch of rise to the tail there, and like 1.5 inches maybe at the nose. And I've been riding this thing in the little skid pond, and it seems to ride pretty dang decently. Seems to be a pretty big improvement. I can even do little shove-its and basic tricks like that. Because I'm still working out the bugs and frankly still learning to ride a skimboard, there are no plans for the boards featured in this video, at least not yet. But the process is so simple, you can build something very similar to my boards based on the information in this video. Matching board size to rider size is probably the most important factor. I would consult commercial board size charts available for free on various retail sites. I'm 5'8" and 155 pounds, and my recommended board dimensions are 20 inches by 51 inches, which are roughly the dimensions of the egg boards. At this point in my experiment, 1/4 inch plywood seems to be the preferred material. If you're much bigger than me, you may want to go with the stouter 3/8 or 1/2 inch stuff. Other than that, just make sure your board has at least a bit of rocker, and you should at least have a functional rig to have some fun with, or for the kids or grandkids to enjoy. If you like waterborne DIY projects like this, you may want to check out my growing library of small boat plans on cumberlandrover.com, as well as the many free boat building videos on this channel. Plans for my 12-foot P-row and 16-foot Pelican punt are linked in the description of this video. Consider giving them a look. Thank you for your support, and thanks for watching.